folks, this is the first of what I hope will be a long series of videos offering tips to young trumpet players as they are learning our standard repertoire. So I thought I'd start with Hummel's very famous trumpet concerto. Well, at least it's very famous among trumpet players. It is one of the best known works in the literature for solo trumpet and orchestra. It was originally composed in E major, but it's often performed in E flat because it's a much more comfortable key, especially for students who are learning it for the first time on B flat trumpet. Now, although this work is very well known and it's used in one of the first major works added to a young player's repertoire, that doesn't mean that it's easy. It still presents a number of significant challenges. So we're starting with the first couple phrases of the concerto, and I hope to add a number of other chunks of the piece in subsequent videos. But two concerns that I think need to be focal points for a student throughout the entire concerto are time and line. So it's probably fairly clear what I mean by time. We want to play with a good sense of pulse. However, it's not supposed to be rigid necessarily. You can have a little bit of push and pull, a little bit of freedom, but it should sound like it grooves to someone who's listening. You don't want the time to be a distraction. And what I try to think of it with this piece is really lining up with the big beats, like feeling it in two. Now by line, I mean a sense of melodic direction, where we really focus on sort of a horizontal energy, even when the writing is very vertical, as in the first gesture, or very technical. So with that first little fanfare, like I still want to feel like it's going to the lower octave with a sense of direction. A great way to work on this, and also just the general quality of your playing, is to play the phrases slowly and slurred. Make sure they're really well connected. Next, put the articulation back in, but still keep it very connected. You want to be as legato as possible and really focus on the line. So a note about interpretation or character. It's often pointed out that this concerto and this first movement is marked by contrasting fanfare type gestures and then very singing gestures. And I think it's true, but I also think that some of the phrases serve as bridges between the styles, and we want our interpretation to reflect that. Take these measures, for example. Now in the next couple passages, we've transitioned into straight up singing. So it should be very, very vocal. We want a sense of line throughout, not too much pop on the articulations, especially the initial attacks. What you do with vibrato is kind of up to you. I tend to use a little more, but you can keep it a little more straight as long as it has that very singing character. Now, something to keep in mind about the second of these phrases. This is where Hummel introduces the chromaticism. That was something of a highlight of the piece because the key bugle was demonstrating the kind of chromatic flexibility in every range that people were not used to hearing. So I like to lean into the chromatics a little bit, especially that final appoggiatura. Now the last phrase of this section transitions back into full-on fanfare character. However, before we get to the end of the gesture where we're clearly in fanfare character with the triplets, let's talk about the trill leading up to it. So the question often arises as a matter of historical accuracy, whether we should start on the upper or lower note of the trill. Now the truth is that I've heard performances using both approaches, and I've heard justifications for using both approaches, but the reason why I start on the lower note generally is because about 20 years ago I was working with an older esteemed conductor who scolded me for starting on the upper note. He said, Hummel was very clear about what he wanted to do with his trills, and that is starting on the lower note. Okay, I never really found documentation of this, by the way, but at the time I said, it doesn't matter to me much either way, and so I'll just go with his way, started playing on the lower note, and I just became accustomed to doing that. So to me, what's important about the trill is that the approach is consistent throughout the piece, and that it sounds good, that it's graceful. Now, making these trills sound graceful can be quite a challenge, so I recommend working on them initially out of time and slowly, just to get a feel for the gesture. Now, once this is working well for you, once it's comfortable, you go back to playing in time, use the metronome, but start slowly and gradually increase the tempo, always trying to maintain that same quality of execution. Then, once you've got it up to tempo, play it in 2 with the metronome to make sure it has the right feel. Next, let's take that trill and put it back into context with the rest of the gestures, so we're including the fanfare triplets at the end. But we want to do it very slowly and all slurred to make sure everything is perfectly connected and that there's a great sense of line. Next, let's put the articulations back in, but keep it very slow and very legato, very connected. You want the same quality of playing you achieved when you're playing it all slurred. Next, we gradually increase the tempo using the metronome and always maintaining the same quality of playing until you reach your target tempo. Also, you can add a little more of a staccato quality to the triplets to your taste. Now, when it comes to determining the best tempo for your performance, usually there's a negotiation between musical and technical considerations. But remember, you should never sacrifice the beauty and consistency of your playing for the sake of speed. Play beautifully, play with commitment, play with great time and great line, and people will love it.